G'day guys, and welcome to a new Blender Guru tutorial. In this video, I'm going to be showing you how to create this smartphone advertisement. So I'm trying to teach you guys things that you could possibly come across in your career as a 3D artist. So if you're planning to be a freelancer or working for a small studio or something like that, product advertisements are quite popular. They make up quite a lot of market, and you might get this type of business come along. So I thought it would make sense to try and cover an example in this tutorial. So this is the type of result we're going for. Kind of a futuristic, it's in space, it's got these lines and energy bars, and it's designed to be something that you would see on a billboard. So just as a quick mock-up, I've just photoshopped it onto a billboard just to see how it would look, just to test it as an advertisement and see if it actually works. So you can see it, it doesn't look too shabby at all. So I'll just show you before we get into the tutorial what the actual scene is made up of. We're going to be modeling the smartphone itself, so that includes also UV unwrapping it and texturing it, because we want to get the label, so it says Samsung at the top and little buttons at the bottom. And as well as that, we're also going to be doing these rays of light, which is going to be shooting out of, from behind the phone. These are kind of energy beams or whatever you want to call them coming out of the phone. And as well as that, also the compositor, and that's really going to make up a lot of it to give it that nice glowy type feel. So I'm covering a lot of things in this tutorial. Hopefully going to have a bit of fun along the way. So with that said, let's now go ahead, open up a new scene in Blender, and we're going to get cracking. First thing I'm going to do is load in a background image, okay, because we're going to be tracing the phone, okay. So I've just grabbed a photo off the internet, just in Google Images, and there you go. So this phone is pretty simple. That's a good thing about smartphones nowadays, is they're all pretty, there's not many buttons on them. They're all very sleek, and it's all touch now, so it makes our life a lot easier. So I'm actually just going to base this off a plane. So first thing I'm going to do is just rotate the plane just so that it's flat, like that. And I'm just going to scale it. And I want to make sure that it fits the screen, not the actual entire width of the phone, okay? So just like that. And the other thing I'm going to do is in edit mode, I'm just going to extrude upwards, and I'm just going to stop at every point where there is detail, okay? So for example, at that point there, I'm just going to extrude up and then stop at that point there where you've got the earpiece, extrude up again, stop, and then extrude up again to the end. Okay, this is going to make sense in a minute. Okay, so just moving that point down, stop, extrude, stop right there, and there, and there, and there, and there. Okay, and now going along vertically, I'm just going to hit Control R and create a loop cut right there. Let me just zoom in so I can see it. Another loop cut right here. Another loop cut about here. And another loop cut also right there. Okay, alright, now it's also important to get the loop cuts for the edge of the screen. So there's one right there, and then there's one right there. And I'm also going to create a loop cut there for that little hole in the camera right there. I'm not going to do one for these two little dots there. I'm not sure what they are, but I don't think they need to have the detail there, so I'm just going to leave them out. And now with that out of the way, now I've got these points in the right place. Oh, actually, no, not in the right place yet. I'm just going to extrude those out a little bit to be about there. And these ones here as well. No, just them. Okay. Move them to about there. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so just making sure they're all good. Yep. Alright, so I'm now just going to go into face select mode. And I'm just going to select these faces and delete them. Same with that one there. Okay, now they look pretty squarish at the moment, but now what I'm going to do is add in a Subsurf modifier, and this is just going to add some smoothness overall to the entire mesh, just like that. And now what I'm going to do is just grab these, actually I might just go into edge mode so I can do that. I'm just going to grab those two holes. They're just holding down Alt and right clicking, by the way, will allow you to do that. And I'm just going to extrude them inwards, like so. Alright, cool. And you'll notice that it's kind of like, it's kind of sucking inwards in towards the mesh. That's because, of course, the Subsurf modifier is kind of blending in and smoothing those corners. So to fix that, what I'm going to do is just go into vertice selection mode. Just select those vertices there, and then turn up the median crease to be 1. And then the same for these ones right here. Median crease, set that to be 1. Okay, cool. So now it's looking nice and smooth. One other thing though is in the background, just where that camera is, I'm just going to make a solid face right there so that you don't see through the mesh, if that makes sense. Alright, so I'm just going to grab those there. These ones here as well. Okay, cool. Now what I'm going to do is just grab these, actually no, we're not going to get to that yet because I've got to make sure that these are smoothed off properly first. So let's do that. So to smooth off these edges, let me just extrude that up a little bit further, okay? I'm just going to move these points inwards, and you can see just in the background, don't pay any attention to where the positions of these vertices are. Just want to get it so that the actual mesh with the Subsurf modifier is actually affecting it properly. So just something a little bit like that. Move that down a little bit. It doesn't need to look perfect. As an artist, it helps to know when something doesn't need to have detail. So if this was like a close-up shot in which you need to have, the phone, doing a 360 and seeing all the little fine details and things like that, then yeah, it would probably help, and it would be your job to, add in those details, make sure that it actually fits the model correctly, and yeah, it will be a lot more important. But with this, you're just seeing the front of the phone. Really only the front needs to look good. You don't need to get into any of the details and things like that. You can get away with doing a lot of cheating, so that's essentially what we're doing right now. Now I'm just grabbing all those edges there, and I'm just extruding them backwards just a little bit, just to give it a little bit of a kind of a lip, okay? Now coming down here for this button, what I'm going to do is go into face select mode, and then just select all of these faces here, holding down shift, and then I'm just going to extrude them outwards, okay? Now it doesn't need to extrude out very far. These smartphones, they're all trying to keep a very flush kind of frontal face look to it. So just like that. And I'm just going to also, should address that. These points here, as you can see, having that kind of smoothing, awful type look to it. So I'm just going to go into vertex mode and just select those like that, holding down Alt, as I said before, and then just increase the median crease all the way to 1, and it's fixed that. And I'm also just going to do the same for these edges right here. Okay. Now, in order to create a button, because you'll notice from the front view, there is kind of a button there. What I'm going to do is just select that back face right there, and then just extrude it upwards, and then scale it inwards. Like so. I'm also just going to turn up that median crease to be 1 as well. And also going into edge select mode. Vertex select mode. Or you can do edge, doesn't really matter. Actually, probably, should do edge select mode. There we go. Just selecting these points here just to get rid of that ugly button there. I'm just going to turn that all the way up to 1 as well. And now you have a nice, clean, flush looking button. So now I'm going to turn on smooth shading. And you'll notice that you get this awful, weird type of effect. The reason it's doing that is you haven't got an edge split modifier. Or really, that is, I suppose, the solution to the problem. Yeah. So anyway, now that you've added that all in, everything is looking pretty good so far. Now we can get onto the rest of the shell itself. So in the background there, you can see there is the shell. So in order to figure out the width of, the holder or the shell, I don't know if that's the correct word. Anyway, you need to get a correct reference image so that you can actually see the width of it. So what I'm going to do is down here underneath background images, I'm actually going to load in a second background image, but I'm only going to make it affect the side view. Okay, so with this image right here, I'm just going to select, instead of making it all views, I'm going to make it select front. So now if you go into side view or top view, you can't see it. It's only going to be visible from the front. And so now I'm just going to click add image, then click open. And this image that I'm loading in right here is just one. Again, I pulled off Google. And it is essentially, it's got, the width of the phone there. Now I want to make sure that it is only showing up on the left side like that. So I think I can only, you have to hold down Control, the number pad 3 to actually see it. But at least that way it's the facing the correct way, if that makes sense. Okay, cool. Now, you don't want to move this so that it matches up with the phone, because then it's actually going to mess up where it is from the front view. What you want to do is actually move the background image so that it matches your mesh there. So what I'm going to do is just move these around like that, then move that one backwards. And I think I just need to resize that as well. Okay, so something... Okay, almost there. Yeah, just like that. So now front view mode matches up, and also the side view does as well. Now, to create the rest of, the shell of the phone, I'm just gonna, as I said before, hold down Alt, you select the entire edge loop like that. I'm just gonna duplicate it, hit Escape, P, and then make it its own separate mesh like that. Okay, so from there, what I can do is I can extrude it outwards like that. Now, one thing to note is that if you look at it from the side view like this, you can see that there is actually a button right there. So what I'm going to have to do is do 2 kind of edge loops that way. But also from the front view, I'd also just want to make sure that it's to the correct width. Or sorry, not width, thickness, looking at it from the front. Okay, cool. Awesome. So I'm just going to extrude it twice. So again, creating that edge loop right there so we can add a button in. And then once again, and then once at the very back, and then scale that downwards. Okay, so that's essentially how the phone's looking now. I might just grab these 2 edge loops there and then just scale them out a little bit just to get that more kind of that rounded look to it. I think that looks, I think that's pretty accurate with the model, I think. Turn on smooth shading to see how it looks. I might just turn up that edge angle so you don't get that sharp edge there as it was before. Now in order to create the button on the side there, it's pretty much the same with what we did before with the creating the button down there. I'm essentially just creating an edge loop there. I'm going to hit S, then scale along the Z axis and hit 0. Okay, so we've got a nice edge loop there. And I'm just going to position it in the right place and then create another one underneath it. Hit S, Z, and 0. That's just a quick way to flatten out that edge loop. Okay. And I'm also going to create 2 new edge loops within that just so that we can get a smooth shape to the button. I'll show you in just a second what I mean. So 2 new edge loops right there, and then just scale it along the Z axis to be about there, I think is fine. And I'm just going to go into face select mode like that, and then delete the faces, and you can see you've now got a nice kind of rounded edge there. So that's why we added in 2 separate cuts right there. Okay, cool. So now I'm just going to select that hole that we've just created. Again, hit Shift D, Escape, and I'm just going to extrude it outwards just to create that little button on the edge there, and then create a face there, and a face there, and another face. Whoa. Selected some faces behind it. Another face right there. Okay, cool. So, phone so far is looking pretty consistent with the reference image that we've got right there. So now it's ready to do the texturing. Now you're probably wondering what kind of texturing we would need to do. I mean, it's not exactly a grungy street scene we're creating. It's a phone. Well, at the top there, you can see we've got the Samsung logo, and you could probably get away with that by using the text tool or whatever, like, various little cheating methods like that. But you've also got the camera. You've also got these little symbols down here, little circles at the top. We won't actually be painting in the camera, but, stuff like that. And, yeah, it really just helps just to be able to paint it in yourself, create those little details, and the model will look good. Before we get into this, though, let's just quickly, let's save this. You can see I've done this. I've got a save file there. I've done this before. The last one crashed on me after I finished recording the tutorial. After an hour passed, the entire thing crashed, so I was livid. Anyway, okay, so to UV unwrap this, what I'm going to do is split the view like that, and then change this to be UV image editor, and we're going to be painting our own texture, remember. So I'm going to first start by creating a new image. So click new, and someone told me that the height and width have to be by multiples of 24 or something like that. I can't remember what it was. Anyway, so I'm just going to set this to be 2048, so that, you know, the height of it is double what the width is, if that makes sense. So I'm going to click OK. So that's roughly, you know, the same sort of aspect ratio of the phone. And I'm going to hit U over here and then select project from view. All right, now I'm just scaling this up as best I can. I'm going to get a drink, excuse me. Oh man, it's really bad. Whenever I have to do a tutorial, I got to close the door to my office so that there's no ambient noise, and it heats up in here really quickly. Okay, all right, cool. So once you've got that, you know, fitting the size of that, what we want to do is we want to export this image here, but we want to be able to see the UV layout of it. Okay. So we can take it into Photoshop or GIMP or a program like that, and then paint and know where the objects are, you know, where we're painting onto the picture, if that makes any sense. So I'm going to select UV and then select Export UV Layout. Okay, so for here, I'm just going to drop this in. We'll just call this UV Layout. Save it in the tutorial folder, that might help. And for the fill opacity, I'm just going to set that to be 0.8, just so that you can actually see it better. Okay, so just as an example, let's export that right now. And now go ahead and open up your favorite image editor. In my case, I'm using Photoshop, but you're welcome to use GIMP if you like. Reason I'm using Photoshop is that it has a couple of tools that I need, and GIMP just doesn't cut it for me, unfortunately. Anyway, so we're just going to load in that image that we have created. So it's UV layout, PNG. And what it will do is it will, you should open the PNG image to be able to see the UV layout, and it's on a separate layer. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to add a new layer, drop it underneath that UV, UV layer right there, so you can actually see that where the phone is. So now I know where the Samsung logo should go. I know where those buttons and things like that need to go. So that's why, exporting to UV layout like this helps. So first thing I'm going to do is, tackle that Samsung logo. So I'm going to go to the Type Select tool. Again, throughout this, I'm going to be referencing tools that are specific to Photoshop, but of course you can use any image editor you like. So the font I read somewhere is actually pretty close to the Arial font. That is the font that I'm talking about is, of course, this one right here. So apparently that's close to Arial. So I'm just going to go ahead, set this to Arial, go for bold, and let's type in Samsung. Doesn't look exactly similar to their logo, but it's pretty close. Now you want to make sure that you get the correct size of the text. So you can see here I've got the S just touching that edge of that, right there. And over here with the G, I've got it, this one just cutting through the middle of the G there. So I want to make sure that I get that same thing happening over here. And that is pretty accurate. That's pretty spot on. So I've got the size set to 28. And that's it's looking pretty good. Now going down here, looking at our reference photo, you can see you've got this little symbol there of the arrow, and you've also got this little note symbol right there. So I'm just going to quickly create this. Again, I'm using Photoshop, and that's one of the reasons I have to use Photoshop, because Photoshop has this tool here where you can just create a custom shape like that. But GIMP, I think you have to actually do it by hand, which is one of the reasons I'm not a fan of it. One of the many reasons. So I'm just going to create this shape very quickly. Just going to rotate that. And again, you want to make sure that you get the size right. So you can see that, looking at this right here, it's just kind of wedged in between that loop there and that loop right there. So I'm just going to position this to be, pretty much exactly right there. And I'm just going to create now a separate object. Sorry, a separate shape over here. Now the shape that I'm trying to create, of course, is this kind of note look, kind of a piece of paper with lines on it, or whatever that button is supposed to be. So really simple. I'm just going to use the line tool, and I'm just going to draw up across, down, and I'm just going to create 2 lines like that. Get it so that it looks consistent to each other. Okay, and also, where's the one that one needs to be just a little bit longer. Zoom in a little bit. Okay, cool. Getting a little bit finicky there, but, you know, anyway. Alright, so once you've got everything... actually, no, we haven't completely finished yet. But anyway, it helps to just turn off that UV layout just so you can see everything a little bit better. Now, one other thing I noted was at the top of the phone, just up here, you've got these 2 circles. You've got like a slightly blue colored one and a little gray or blackish colored one. So I'm just going to quickly paint that in here. Very, very simply, just by adding a circle object, like so. I'm just going to drop that in right there. Okay. And I'm going to set this color here to be a nice dark grayish color. Sorry, a dark bluish color. Like this, something like that. And I'm going to duplicate it. And this one is going to be our kind of gray color. Like so. Okay, cool. So I'm going to turn off that UV layer background like that. So you can see now what we've got in front of us. It's just that bare, you know, UV layout like that. So I'm going to save this now as a PNG. I'm just going to drop this in right here. Like that. Again, it's important to you that you turn off that UV layout. If you export it with it on there, it's going to show up on the model, which you don't want. Okay, so once we've got that there, we should now just go into edit mode, hit open, and we should be able to just select that image that we've just created, and it should fit perfectly over what we've got in the UV image editor there. And if you switch to textured view mode, like so, then you can see that everything is in the correct place and everything looks fine. Actually, one thing that's just bugging me, that A there, where that little, you know, the point of the A, they don't have that little line across there, and I know this is just completely unnecessary, but I'm just going to really quickly fix that because, you know, it's one of those things that I think just looks cool, and if you don't do it, I think that it, you know, it just kind of suffers a little bit. Okay, so I'm just going to quickly, just very quickly erase that. Oh yeah, like that. Nice. So, save that over the top of the other one. Okay. Go back into it. You can reopen it. And now, if we just zoom out very quickly, I'm going to give this a quick render right now. Oh, that's the other thing we suppose we should do, is actually add that texture to the model. So just add a quick material, texture, image, and then select that image. And then change the mapping to UV as well. And we should now be able to see our new texture over the top of the phone. So it's already looking pretty good. Well, kind of. Not really special, but you know. Okay. Alright, so now what we're going to do is get into sort of positioning and getting the scene into a kind of, yeah, a workable looking scene. So first thing I'm going to do is just position the camera to be in the right place. Now this is a fairly important step which I don't want you to overlook. Really, I find a lot of times people's composition for the scene is severely lacking, where they haven't given much thought to you know, camera angles and things like that. And it really does help to study that. So just a little tip there for you. So with the camera selected, I can actually just turn on thirds, and you can see, you know, going by the rule of thirds, that the phone should be positioned about there. The other thing is I'm going to change the focal length to be 25, and that just makes the kind of the scene look a little bit more dynamic, if that makes any sense. It kind of feels like one of those buzzwords you throw around, like add more dynamicism to the scene. All right, that's all right. It's not too bad. Okay, so now I'm just going to get into the lighting. Lighting is very, very simple. We're just going to change the default lamp to be area. Set the size to be 8, just to give a kind of nice blanket type look to the phone. You know, over the top of the phone. Set the energy to be 5, and it's positioned about there. I think it's pretty good. Just give this a render now. and you can see it's not looking too bad. So now getting into the materials for the phone, what we want to do is give it a nice kind of glossy sheen to it. Okay, so to do that, essentially just going down here underneath mirror, setting it to be 0.3. Now if you've rendered this right now, you're not going to see anything. Reason for that, of course, is there's nothing really else in the scene for it to reflect. So what we want to do is, again, having a look at the, not that one. That was a failed attempt. Having a look at the finished result here, you can see you're getting that nice kind of glossy finish to it. That's the kind of look we're going for. So essentially what we're going to do is just create a white plane off the side, off camera, just to reflect onto the phone, if that makes sense. So let me just go back to the scene right here. All right, and I might actually just position it to be a little bit, maybe it was better before. I'm just trying to just get it lined up with, you know, how the original one looks, because I want to make sure that the result that I create in the tutorials is at least fairly consistent with how the original one looks. So I'm just gonna Alt-Tab back and forth between that. All right, so yeah, creating that plane. Add a mesh. This is a really, you know, kind of cheater's way of just adding something to reflect. Sometimes you can get away just by using like an HDR image, putting that into the sky settings or whatever. But in this case, we just want that high gloss plane off the side of the screen. So I'm just going to give that a quick render now. All right, so whoop. So the plane itself needs to be moved just a little bit over, like that, down a little bit, and scaled up. Whoa, no, okay. Up just a little bit more, and there we go. We've now got that nice sheen type look over the top of the phone. So it's coming together pretty good. Now you might be wondering, how are we going to get that home screen, sort of, you know, the screen for the phone itself? How are we going to get that showing up on our phone? Well, very, very simple. Well, not really all that simple. What I'm going to do is just select these vertices right here. Again, you're making sure, as I was modeling it before, that I actually put edge cuts in the appropriate places so I can actually do this. And what I'm going to do is create a separate material, and this is just going to be a clear glass type material. So I'm just going to go down here underneath transparency, set that to be 0.1, and turn the mirror value all the way up to 1. Okay, like that. And I'm also just going to turn the specularity down to be a 0.3, like so, and I might just do the same for the main material right there. And now what I'm going to do is actually, first, let's just call this material glass, so we can differentiate between it. Call that one shell. So for this glass here, or no, it should be face, shouldn't it? We're going to have a different material for the shell. For this glass material here, I'm just going to hit assign, okay? Because we've got the vertices selected, so hitting assign, it's now part of it. So if I just to show you what the difference is, you can see you've now got the black texture for the face, and then the glass is now that separate texture in the middle. However, you'll notice that the gray part there, or where the material should be, isn't lining up with the corners. Reason, of course, is that you've got the Subsurf modifier added, so it's kind of distorting it a bit. So what I'm going to have to actually do is just select those edge loops right there. Actually, I should have done that in edge select mode, like that. Same ones there. And I'm going to go into our transform settings here and then turn up that crease, and we've now got a nice clean edge to it, like so. So now if we give this a render, you should be able to see right through the phone, just like that. Okay, cool. So you're probably still wondering, Andrew, how are we going to get that screen in the background? Well, we're going to select the glass, like so, duplicate it, hit escape, P, and then make it a separate mesh, like so. Now I'm just going to move that, just going into side view mode, just move it slightly back, just so that it's just behind the glass. I'm going to remove the materials that are there, give it a new material, set it to be emit value of 1, and I'm going to give it a new texture, image, and this image is just a home screen kind of screenshot which I pulled off of Google Images. And let's just check everything else is good. we'll give that a quick render now. I'm not sure how. Yeah, all right. Well, that turned out pretty good. In the past, I've actually had to UV unwrap it, but that is it's looking pretty fine actually. Okay, cool. So the Samsung phone is a, well, actually no, the shell should probably, we just give a quick material to that. Pretty easy. Just give it a grayish type material, and we'll turn up the reflectivity to be 0.5 or something like that. But you could see the phone is really now coming together, and it's looking like a phone. Okay, so the next thing we're going to create is those energy bars, or kind of those, you know, neon type looks coming out of the phone. So to create that, what we're going to have to actually do is add a curve, okay? Something I don't use a lot, but we're going to add one now. And the reason for that is that once you've added a curve, you can then turn it into a tube very easily. Unlike, you know, if you added a cylinder mesh or whatever, it becomes very, very complicated. So using a curve is very easy to work with in this situation. So what I'm going to do is just create the basic outline of this phone. Okay, so just getting it to the edge like that. Another one there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to subdivide it. Okay, so just once like that. And what I should do next, you'll notice that once you've got it on like the default handles like that, you can't rotate it or scale it or do anything interesting with it. So I'm going to select all of them, hit V, and then select aligned. Okay, so now you can actually rotate them and scale them, etc. So I think it should probably be like that by default. That's my personal preference anyway. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just make these, you know, just hit the edge there, scale them along the x-axis, like so. Okay, and I'm just going to create another subdivide right here, scale that along the z-axis, just getting pretty casual, scale it like this, and I'll do another one at the top there. Oh, nope, I did that wrong. Scale Z-axis. There we go. Okay, save it before you do anything else. Blender has been crashing a lot on me recently. So I'm just selecting all of those points there. I might just delete that one in the middle. It's unnecessary. Same with you, and same with you. So you just want to make sure that the 2 points are, you know, on the same line, so you don't have a kind of curvature on the edge, if that makes any sense. Sometimes I just babble, and it doesn't make any sense, as I'm sure you know. Okay, alright, so I'm just moving these up just to get, doesn't have to be perfect. Again, going back to what I said earlier, don't go into too much detail when it's not necessary, especially for something as simple and trivial as this. Alright, so once you've got the curves in the, you know, the right shape of the outside of the phone, what I'm going to do is go into the curve options, and I'm going to increase the depth. And that is essentially going to be the thickness of those energy bars. So if you want thicker ones, turn it up. But in this case, I'm going to set mine to be about a 0.01. And also, I'm going to turn up the resolution to be 3. Because by default, it just sets it, you know, so that it's like a cube. But I turn that up to be about 3, and it should be fine. And also turn off back and front, and that will enable you to see the full tube effect. Okay, but now comes the fun part. Fun part, and no, it's not fun. What we need to do is duplicate this, and just one by one scale, hold down Control, and then move it up 1 notch, and then click duplicate, escape, scale, 1 notch, and you can, I think, use the array modifier and just make it kind of, you know, emit from an empty, and you'll have a similar effect. But I think I found some problems with that, and it just wasn't working for me. So I found it better just to do it by myself. I don't know if that would probably make any difference, but anyway. Okay. All right. So you'll notice that looking at it from, you know, that little thin one at the start there, as it progresses out, they get thicker, and you don't want it to get thicker. You want them all to be roughly the same size, or exactly the same size. So what I'm going to do is select all of them like that, then hit Control J, and you'll notice that they are all now exactly the same size, and that's because they're now all using the same you know, depth or bevel or whatever you want to call it. So Yeah, it's all matching. However, there is a problem. We want them to fade out over time. So you want them, the ones near the front of the phone, to be, very bright and very glaring. But then as they fade out, you want them to slowly disappear. So we're going to have to actually create separate materials for each one of these neon tubes. So where we're going to do that is in edit mode. I'm going to select L first of all, hit P, and this is so that we're all breaking them up into separate meshes. And then later on, we're going to, in a second, create the materials. Okay, so they're all now a different object. Good. Fixed that problem. Okay, so the next part is to create the materials. So I'm going to add a new material, set the emit value to be 1, and I'm also going to turn on transparency, okay? I'm not going to change anything there, but in the other, as we go through the materials, they are going to change. So I'm just going to call this... let's just call it, let's call it neon, like so. And what we need to do, this is kind of fiddly, it's just really boring and annoying. I'm just going to, why didn't I do that? Hang on. I'm making a mess of this tutorial. Select all of those neons there, hit Control L, and then select materials. Okay, they are all now using the same material, but we need to create separate materials for each one of these objects. So with that one there, I'm going to click the number next to the name, and I'm just going to go down here underneath transparency and set that to be 0.8, like so. Going to go to the next one, click the number, set that to be 0.7, number 0.6, which I might just move these down so you don't have to go up and down all the time. This one's going to be this one's going to be 0.5 in that case. Alright, number, let's go for 0.4. As they get towards the edge, you want to make it so that they fade out a little bit slower. So just as we get towards in here, I'm just going to make this 0.25, and then 0.2, and then 0.15, maybe. Let's just move that out again. I'll just create another one. This one's going to be 0.1. And one final one. This one's going to be 0.05. Like so. Okay, cool. Woo, exhausting. Let's go ahead and render that. And if you've done it correctly, they should now all fade out, as you can see right there. Okay, cool. So they're looking fine. Now for the background itself, we're going to make that a black color, and we're going to add in some stars. So stars are fairly easy. You just click the button, you render it, and they look like crap. So in order to get better looking stars, just share with you a few tips that I've discovered over the years. First thing is you want to turn the minimum distance up to be around about 100. That's minimum distance the stars can be away from the camera. So once you've done that, you also need to turn up the clipping distance of the camera so that it is more than what the minimum distance over here is. Once you've done that, change the separator to be about 5 or something like that, and then change the size to be something that you'd be happy with. So about a 0.2 or something like that. Give that a render now, and you can see you've got some nice looking stars. You don't have too many big ones. A lot of the times you have like problems with blotchy, big looking stars showing up. So that's why minimum distance fixes that problem. And also, you might want to turn up the color as well, just to give the stars a little bit of color variation. I think just helps just kind of bring it to life, add a little bit more dynamicism to the image. And just checking everything, I think the only thing really left to do is to create those rays of light. Okay, so essentially, coming back here, you can see you've got this kind of powerful light glowing out from behind the phone. So easy way to create that is just with this shell there selected. I'm just going to go into, just select that entire edge loop right there, hit Shift D, Escape, P, make it its own separate mesh. Done this a few times now. And, oh, not that one. Which one am I clicking? That one. Okay, move it from behind the phone like that. And going into edit mode, I'm just going to extrude it outwards like so. Just to about that shape right there. Now, the way we're going to get that ray of light look is by applying a texture and making the texture, you know, one of those gradient type looks to it, so that it starts out white hot and then fades out slowly as it goes along. So that's the type of look that we're going for. So first thing I need to do though is, because we've kind of modeled it in a strange way, I'm just going to hit recalculate normals and also hit Control A and then select apply rotation. Okay, now underneath materials, what I'm going to do is give it a new material like this, turn on transparency and turn the alpha all the way to 0, and also underneath shading, turn the emit value all the way up to 1. Okay, now when we go over to the texture panel and add a blend node, turn on color ramp like that, and then underneath influence you turn on alpha, and now if you give it a render, you'll notice that, well, the gradient is in the wrong direction, but the gradient is working. So it's showing up white hot, but it's slowly fading out over time. So turn on vertical, and it should now be fading out from the right point, like so. You'll notice that the gradient kind of cuts out harshly at the end there. That's due to this ramp being set to linear. So let's change that to, let's try B-spline. No, B-spline is worse. Let's try ease. There we go. Now it's a little bit smoother and it looks a little bit nicer. Now, in order to make it look even cooler, what I'm going to do is add in a texture to kind of give those rays. Okay, so this is again the finished look there. So you've got that kind of glowing ray type look there. So what I'm going to do is add in a cloud texture, and I'm going to change the color to be black, like so. So underneath materials, you can see how that's looking right there. And what we're going to do, in order to get that kind of streak type effect, we're going to cheat. We're actually going to use the wrong mapping options to essentially distort it and make it look awful. But it's actually going to work. So I'm going to set the X mapping to be none. Let's just see how that looks. Nope. Let's change the Y mapping to be Z. Okay, I think, let me just try setting that to X again. And I think, yeah, there you go. So essentially by changing that Y mapping to be Z, you can see in the 3D view you've got that, you know, terrible texture stretching problem. But it's a really quick way just to cheat and to get that nice effect without really having to do too much work. And it doesn't look too bad, I think. It works, yeah. For the amount of effort required, it's fairly simple. Okay. Alright, now the only other thing left to really add to the scene is a kind of a, I don't know, a gradient type effect to the background. So you want to make it look as though it's glowing from behind the phone. So it's got kind of like an overall blue kind of glow. So you don't have these gaping holes in this black part over here. So in order to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a halo material. So if you've never used halo materials before, you're not really missing out on much. I rarely ever use them in my tutorials. They're very kind of old technology, really. But anyway, what I'm going to do is just add in a plane like this, go into edit mode, unselect one vertice, and then delete everything like that. So you've now just got one vertice. In order to keep things tidy, I'm just going to move the cursor, the origin point to be at the vertice. And so that I can see it better, under display, I'm going to turn on axes like that. Now you can't use an empty for this. You have to actually use one vertex in order for it to actually show up. It's just one of those things. Okay, so I'm just positioning that to be behind the phone like that. And underneath materials, this is where the magic is going to happen. I'm just going to add halo like that, and I'm going to set the size to be, let's say, 10. Give that a render right now, and you can see we now have a nice halo showing up from behind the phone. Now I want it to be primarily just over to the left side, a little bit more than what's on the right. So, yeah, I don't know, maybe something like that I think is fine. Now the glow is looking a little bit too uniform at the moment. So in order to make it look cooler, essentially, we're going to add a texture. Very easy. Texture, clouds, and I'm going to set that to be black. And now give that, also underneath halo options, turn on texture. And now give that a render, and you can see it now has a little bit more oomph to it, a little bit more power and dynamicism. Excuse me. Ooh, voice is getting croaky. Alright, cool. everything that we need in the scene has essentially been added. The next step is to separate these objects into separate render layers so that we can apply different effects, different glows and effects and things like that to different parts of the scene. So this is really easy. Essentially what we do is just figure out, what things need to glow, and if they do, they need to be on a separate render layer. So I'm going to select all of these neon bars right here, and I'm going to move them to first a separate physical layer. So I'm going to move them to separate layer 2 like that. And underneath render layers over here, we need to add a new render layer, which is of course different to a physical layer. And I'm just going to call this neons. Select layer 2 that we've just added it to, and make sure that it masks layer 1. We don't want to check all Z, or else it's going to mask off this ray light type of effect, and it's just going to come up looking awful. So just select layer 1 so that it blocks out the phone itself, because that's what the phone is going to be on, but it doesn't block out that or anything else, if that makes sense. We also need to uncheck halo, or else it's going to render in the stars as well, and it's going to try and add a glow effect to the stars. And also uncheck sky as well. Alright, another thing that needs to be on a separate layer is the screen itself. So I'm going to add a new render layer, call this screen, and move it to a physical layer first of all, change it to layer 3. And select layer 3 over there. Again, actually no, we don't need to do any masking for this one because it's in the middle of the phone, that's fine. And just again, unchecking halo and unchecking sky. Okay, the other thing and the final thing that needs to be separated is the rays of light there, as well as that gradient kind of glow in the background. So I'm just going to move that to be layer 4, and this is going to be, we'll just call it rays of light. Layer 4, and check again layer 1 to be masked, and we don't want to uncheck halo, or else that object there in the background isn't going to render. But uncheck sky, give that a render now, and the rest of the scene is missing. That's of course because they're on different render layers. So we can now jump over to the compositor, and we're actually doing okay for time. Although I keep stuttering and saying the wrong words, I'm trying to get through this as quickly as possible. Okay, cool. So let me just add in a viewer node so that we can see everything clearly. Okay, so this is what the that's one other problem. The actual main render layer itself needs to only render layer 1 like that. So let's go ahead. Also turn off halo and leave sky. Anyway, give that a render now. Okay, cool. So first things first, let's add in the screen. So add in new render layer, set it to be screen. Going to add a mix node. This is how we're going to combine the two. Set this to be add 1, and see how that looks. Okay, so you've now just got the screen just added in very, very simply. Now, in order to give the screen a glowing effect, I'm going to add a blur node, drop it in here, set this to fast Gaussian, relative, and let's go for just 1%. Set the aspect correction to be Y. Don't ask why. And just add in a mix node here. Set that to add 1. And then just like that. So you've now got a very quick kind of glow effect. But one thing I like to do, and one thing I found that kind of improved it, is if you actually flip these like that, and then set the factor amount to be 2, what it's going to do is double up the intensity of the original screen itself over the top of the blur effect. So if you actually flip these around, you would be doubling the blur effect. If you change it up to 5, it's going to be 5 times the glow effect. But if you make it so that the actual, the screen itself is at the bottom, that's going to be overpowering over the top of the blur, if that makes any sense. Anyway, so I found that kind of gave it more of a kick and a more vivid type look, which is something that the Galaxy is kind of famous for. So that's what we're trying to get across in the image. Okay, so next thing I'm going to do is, let me just go render layers. I'm going to add in those neons. Okay, so let's just drop this in. Let's see how this looks right there. Okay, cool. So again, I'm going to add in a blur node, fast Gaussian, relative, Y. And let's set that to 2%. Mix node, set it to add, of course. Blend it all together, see how it looks. Whoop. Okay, now, one thing that we want to do is we want to make the glow effect look blue, okay? But we don't want it to actually affect the color of these white bars. We want the bars to look white and hot or whatever, but just the glow effect, you want it to have a blue kind of tinge to it. So what I'm going to do is add in a color ramp and just connect it to the blur node. So it's not powering this one, the actual neons itself, just the blur itself. Now, this color ramp, if you've never used it before, it just breaks the image down into grayscale values and then allows you to change those values. So I'm just going to change the white values to now be whatever color I want that glow to be. In this case, a nice blue color like so. So, very quick way of adding a blue glow. Alright, so now to combine this with the rest of the scene. Okay, not looking too bad. So finally, I think all that's left to do now is add in the backdrop and those rays of light. And the quickest way to do that is render layer. Set this to be rays of light. See what we've got there. And I'm just going to add in a mix node. Set this to be add. Like so. And there you go. Now we want to give this a color as well so that it actually matches the rest of the scene. So I'm just going to duplicate that color ramp, drop this in here. And the color, you know, I don't want it to be the same color as the glow. It's a little bit too intense. So I'm just going to make that kind of a more lightish, bluish color like that. So the downside is that it's also coloring the stars in the background. I probably should have separated that into different render layers or whatever, but it's not too bad. It's not a complete scene destroyer or anything like that. So just try and overpower that amount, see if it makes any difference. Sometimes it helps just to give it a really glowy type look to it. Just compare that with the original. Yeah, it's not too bad, I think. I think actually one thing I don't like is you'll notice on the top of the phone there, that area lamp there has got a little bit of glare to it. So I'm just going to turn off specularity, and maybe that'll just remove that. There you go. It looks a little bit cleaner, a little bit nicer now. Okay, cool. So now that we've got that, now comes the part where we're going to take it into a image editor and just do a little bit of post-processing, just adding in text, a few other little touches like that, just to give the scene a little bit more power, a little bit more oomph. So I'm just going to save what we've done so far to a separate image by hitting F3, and I'm just going to go, yeah, tutorial. Let's call this tutorial results. Drop this in right here. And let me just see if I can find it. There you go, tutorial result, right there. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to give it a adjustment layer. Again, I'm using Photoshop for this. You might want to use GIMP or whatever. I mean, you could do all this stuff in GIMP pretty much. Anyway, adding this adjustment layer here, I'm just going to turn up the saturation. That's one of the things I found really improved this image, is the default colors, you know, for the screen and everything like that look a little bit bland. So I'm just turning up the saturation, and that's going to give it a little bit more power. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to add some coloration to these blue neons there, because currently they look cool, but it's just all blue and it's a little bit too intense. So I'm going to add a new layer over the top of everything else. I'm going to turn on the gradient tool, and what this will allow me to do is just to paint you know, something like this. Now, you're probably wondering why I'm just suddenly blotting over the scene in these horrible colors. I'm going to change the blending mode to be color, like this, and then turn the opacity down to be something that suits. So something, I don't know, about that I think looks pretty fine. And I don't want it to actually affect the middle part of the phone there. I only want it to really affect these blue neons and things like that. So I'm going to add, just grab this eraser tool here, and then I'm just going to just remove these parts right there. Actually, I might just make it smoother so it doesn't have that, yeah, harsh type look to it. So this is really easy, just removing that blue discoloration to the phone itself, but it's keeping it on the rest of it there. So I think that's looking pretty cool. Now all that's left to do is to add in the text. So again, this is something that needs to be seen from the highway, something as you're driving past. You want to have a short, snappy tagline. Now, I didn't actually invent the one that was on mine. I just went straight to the Samsung Galaxy website and just used their tagline in a completely uncreative way. So I just type in here, vivid, slim. No, it was the other way around, wasn't it? No, maybe it was, yeah. Vivid, slim, fast. Okay, just like that. Short and snappy. And of course, you also want to have the brand of the phone itself, because you wouldn't just see an advert like that, because you'd go, well, I like the product, but what is it exactly? So you got to add that in. Now, I went to a website, I think it was called Logos of the World or something like that, and I actually found the original logo or something. You could just download it, and it's pretty handy. It's just in a vector file, so I'm just loading up Illustrator right now. Again, this is really just going beyond what was really necessary for the tutorial, but I'm just going to throw it in here anyway. So if anybody out there is using Photoshop, you might know what to do. Okay, so I'm just dropping this in right here. And you want the logo to actually be smaller than the tagline, because the tagline is really what's going to get people sold on it. You want to give the main selling point for the item. So that's why I'm doing it in this way. A lot of people do it the other way around, and you know, unless you're a big company or, I don't know, something that's really known for the brand or something, you don't really want to make it too, you know, bigger than the tagline, if that makes any sense. Anyway, so something like that. And that's it, guys. Thanks for taking some time out of your day to check out the tutorial. I'm hoping you guys are able to use it to something productive and valuable. So have fun with it. I'm interested in seeing any creations you create with it, of course. So post them in the comments below. And as always, thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.